I stared at my phone, reading the text message for the third time. I've changed all the locks. The house is mine now, don't bother coming home. My husband David's words glowed on the screen with casual cruelty. I might have been devastated if I hadn't just walked out of the most important meeting of my life, the one where I'd finalized the sale of my tech company for $12 million. I'm Sophia Anderson, 34 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought the hardest part of my day would be keeping this incredible news from my husband until the perfect moment. Now, it seemed he had plans of his own. Another text buzzed through. I've left some of your clothes in a box on the porch. The rest is going to Goodwill tomorrow. Time to grow up and get a real job. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. For 3 years, David had dismissed my work as playing around with that little app of yours. He never bothered to understand what I was building, never showed any interest in my growing user base or the venture capital meetings I attended. In his mind, I was just wasting time that could be better spent supporting his real estate career. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from my lawyer, confirming that the sale had been finalized and the funds would be transferred to my private account within the hour. The account David knew nothing about, because he'd never bothered to ask about my finances. Everything okay? Sarah, my best friend and head of product development, appeared at my elbow. She'd been with me since the beginning, when Secure Share was just an idea sketched out on coffee shop napkins. I showed her David's texts. Her eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. That absolute. Wait, he doesn't know about the sale? Nope, I popped the P sound, feeling strangely calm. He thinks I'm at another pointless startup meeting instead of focusing on real work. Sarah's expression shifted from anger to wicked delight. Oh, this is going to be good. What's the plan? I glanced at my watch, 2:47 p.m. First, I need to make sure he's not bluffing about the locks. Then, I think it's time to show my darling husband exactly what my little app is worth. We drove to my house, no, David's house now, apparently, in Sarah's Tesla. Sure enough, there was a cardboard box on the porch containing a random assortment of my clothes, mostly old t-shirts and yoga pants. David had always hated how I dressed like a college student when I was coding. I tried my key in the lock, it didn't work. He really did it, Sarah breathed, equal parts horrified and amused. He actually changed the locks on you. Looks like it. I picked up the box and sorted through it. Interesting that he didn't include any of my designer pieces. You know, the ones he insisted I buy for his real estate networking events? Sarah snorted. Probably thinks he can sell them to cover his mortgage now that he's losing your income. She wasn't wrong. Despite David's successful career, he'd grown increasingly dependent on my steady income to maintain his lavish lifestyle. The irony was that he thought my money came from freelance web design work, the cover story I'd used when we first met. I'd tried to tell him about Secure Share's growth several times, but he always changed the subject or made some dismissive comment about hobby projects. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The funds had cleared, $12 million, minus taxes and fees, sitting in my account. 3 years of work, countless sleepless nights, and endless criticism from my husband had led to this moment. What now? Sarah asked as we drove away from the house. We could call a locksmith. Get you back in. I shook my head. No, I have a better idea. Let's get coffee. Over lattes at our favorite cafe, the same one where we'd first conceived Secure Share. I laid out my plan. Sarah's grin grew wider with each detail. You're evil, she declared when I finished. I love it. First stop, my lawyer's office. Richard had handled the sale of Secure Share and knew about David's dismissive attitude toward my work. He was more than happy to help draft the necessary documents. Are you sure about this? He asked as I signed the papers. We could fight for your share of the house in the divorce. I'm sure, I replied. Sometimes letting go of something small leads to something better. Next, we visited 3 high-end real estate agencies, all competitors of David's firm. By the time we left the third office, everything was arranged. Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. When do you think he'll notice? She asked as we headed to our final destination. Knowing David? As soon as the first client calls to cancel. We checked into the presidential suite at the Four Seasons, my new temporary home. I changed into one of my unprofessional coding outfits, ripped jeans, a vintage Nintendo t-shirt, and my lucky coding hoodie. Then I settled in to wait. The first call came at 7:23 p.m. What did you do? David's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I'm not sure what you mean, I replied calmly. I'm just following your advice, focusing on real work instead of my little app. Cut the crap, Sophia. 3 of my biggest clients just called to cancel their listings. They say they've signed with Davidson Associates instead. Did you have something to do with this? Oh, that. I said lightly. Well, you see, I had some extra cash from selling my hobby project, and real estate seemed like a solid investment. Davidson Associates had an excellent proposition for expanding their luxury division. There was a long pause. What are you talking about? Secure Share, David, my little app? The one you never wanted to hear about? I sold it today for $12 million. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You're lying, he finally managed. Check the business news, I suggested. The press release went out an hour ago. Revolutionary privacy protection app Secure Share acquired for 8 figures. They're calling it the security breakthrough of the year. I could hear him fumbling with his computer, probably pulling up the news. The sharp intake of breath told me he'd found it. Sophia, his voice had changed completely, taking on the smooth, cajoling tone he used with difficult clients. Baby, we need to talk about this. I know I've been harsh lately, but with this kind of success, we could really make things work. Why don't you come home and we'll discuss it? I thought the house was yours now, I reminded him. Besides, I'm quite comfortable at the Four Seasons. The presidential suite has an excellent view of the city. The presidential, he sputtered. Do you know how much that costs per night? About what I make in 10 minutes now, I said sweetly. Oh, and David? You might want to start looking for a new office space. Davidson Associates just bought your building. They're planning to renovate once all current leases expire, which, for your firm, is in about 3 months. The string of expletives that followed was quite creative. I let him rant for a moment before interrupting. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. Don't worry about sending the rest of my clothes to Goodwill. I've already ordered a new wardrobe. Although, I paused for effect. You might want to check the labels on those designer pieces you kept. The real ones are in my suite. I left the convincing fakes for you. Fakes? He sounded faint. But you bought those at. No, you insisted on buying them at full price from luxury boutiques. I bought mine from my friend's high-end consignment shop and invested the difference in my company. Good thing too, that initial investment paid off quite nicely. I ended the call while he was still sputtering. Sarah, who had been recording the whole conversation for posterity, and possibly future entertainment, slow-clapped. That, she declared, was magnificent. The next few weeks were interesting, to say the least. David oscillated between rage, pleading, and attempts at manipulation. He tried to claim he deserved half of Secure Share's sale price as my husband. My lawyer quickly shut that down with documentation showing the company had been founded and funded entirely before our marriage, with ironclad separation of assets. He attempted to paint me as an unstable workaholic who had neglected our marriage in pursuit of success. Unfortunately for him, our couples therapist, whom he'd insisted we see last year, had detailed notes about his dismissive attitude toward my career and his financial dependence on my income. Finally, he tried to rally our friends to his side, claiming I had blindsided him with the sale and betrayed his trust. This backfired spectacularly when several friends produced text messages showing him mocking my cute little computer project and boasting about how he was going to lock me out until I grew up and got a real job. Through it all, I maintained my calm, conducting business from my suite at the Four Seasons and watching as my investments through Davidson Associates began to bear fruit. Turns out my understanding of privacy technology gave me unique insights into what high-end real estate clients really wanted in terms of security and discretion. 3 months after the lock incident, as Sarah had dubbed it, I received an unexpected visit. I was working on plans for my next venture when the suite's doorbell rang. Opening it, I found David standing there, looking significantly less polished than usual. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I considered shutting the door, but curiosity won out. "Come in." He entered hesitantly, taking in the spectacular view and luxurious furnishings with poorly concealed envy. "Nice place. It serves its purpose," I replied neutrally. "What do you want, David?" He sank into one of the plush armchairs, suddenly looking very tired. "I lost the house," he admitted, "and the car, and most of my clients. Turns out people don't want to work with a realtor who can't even keep his own office space." "That sounds difficult," I said, not offering any sympathy. "I was wrong," he blurted out. "About everything. Your work, your potential, you." I was so focused on maintaining this image of success that I couldn't see I was married to the real thing. I studied him carefully. "Why are you here, David?" I thought, maybe we could start over? "Now that I understand what you're capable of." He trailed off as I started laughing. now that I'm rich. You mean? I shook my head. The time to appreciate my capabilities was when I was working 18-hour days to build something I believed in. The time to support me was when I needed a partner, not a critic. You didn't believe in me then, I don't need you to believe in me now. I don't have anywhere else to go, he admitted quietly. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the affection I'd once had for him. Then I remembered the box of old clothes on the porch, the casual cruelty of his texts. Actually, you do, I said, pulling out my tablet. I took the liberty of finding you a new place to live. I showed him the listing. It's a small studio apartment above a convenience store. The rent is reasonable, and the landlord owes me a favor. He's willing to overlook your recent credit issues. David stared at the listing, then at me. This is actually kind of you. No, I corrected him. It would have been kind to believe in your wife's dreams. This is business. The apartment is owned by one of my subsidiary companies. You'll be paying market rate rent, which will go toward my next investment property. Consider it your contribution to my continuing success. He flinched at that but took the printed lease agreement I offered. As he signed it, I saw him notice the company name at the top, Second Chances, LLC. Is this a reminder? I said firmly. Every time you write your rent check, remember that second chances have to be earned, not bought. You taught me that, actually, when you changed those locks. After he left, I stood looking out over the city lights. In the reflection of the window, I could see my younger self, the hopeful entrepreneur who had once believed she needed a man's validation to be successful. She had learned, as so many women do, that the only validation that matters is the one that comes from believing in yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Drinks? The team wants to celebrate the new project launch. I smiled, gathering my things. My next venture was already taking shape, a tech incubator specifically focused on supporting women in STEM fields. The irony of using David's rent money to fund other women's dreams wasn't lost on me. As I left the suite, I made sure all 3 locks were secured. Some habits, I've learned, are worth keeping. Others, like waiting for someone else's approval, are better left behind with the fake designer clothes and the false sense of security they once provided. The night doorman tipped his hat as I passed. Have a good evening, Ms. Anderson. The best, I replied, stepping into the warm evening air. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I was. Sometimes getting locked out of one door leads you exactly where you need to go. In my case, it led to freedom, success, and the knowledge that the only person who needs to believe in your dreams is you. Though I have to admit, having $12 million doesn't hurt either. Epilogue. 1 year later. The tech incubator, which I named Unlocked Potential, has helped launch 15 successful startups, all led by women. David still lives in the studio apartment, though he's slowly rebuilding his real estate career. He specializes now in helping single professional women find their first homes, a niche he says has taught him more about respect and empowerment than he ever learned in his previous life. Sarah runs the day-to-day operations of Unlocked Potential while I focus on mentoring our newest cohort of entrepreneurs. Last week, a young woman came to pitch her app idea, nervously explaining that her husband thinks it's just a hobby. I shared my story with her, and the next day, she came back with fire in her eyes and a solid business plan in her hands. Sometimes the best motivation comes from knowing you're not alone in your journey. The Four Seasons eventually became my permanent residence. I bought the entire floor and converted it into a combination living space and innovation hub. The presidential suite, where I stayed during those transformative weeks, is now a free accommodation for entrepreneurs in our program who need a fresh start. And those fake designer clothes David kept? I heard he tried to sell them at a consignment shop. Apparently, the owner, my friend who had helped me invest in secure share instead of luxury brands, recognized them immediately. She offered him store credit, which he used to buy a genuine suit for job interviews. Life has a way of coming full circle, teaching us the lessons we need to learn. Sometimes those lessons come in the form of changed locks and cardboard boxes on porches. Sometimes they come in the form of multi-million-dollar exits and presidential suites. But the most valuable lesson? It's not about the money, the success, or even the revenge. It's about believing in yourself enough to build something meaningful, even when others try to lock you out of your own dreams. As for me, I keep 3 sets of keys now, one for my home, one for my office, and one for the studio apartment above the convenience store. Not because I ever plan to use the last one, but because it reminds me that sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you exactly who they are, even if they have to change the locks to do it.